What happens when a country is no longer moving forward? Yemen is frozen, trapped by war, famine, and global neglect. In Yemen, time isn't just running out, it's bleeding away. In 2015, one of the world's greatest humanitarian crises began after the Houthis, known as Ansar Allah, shattered Yemen's fragile stability and began conflict with Yemen's government forces. Over the next 10 years, as conflict escalated, the people of Yemen would be subjected to mass displacement, a direct result of the conflict's dangerous outcomes and economic downfall, where millions fled their homes, leaving their country in ruins and in dire need for humanitarian aid. But this crisis did not emerge overnight. Even before, Yemen was already struggling. Over half of its citizens live in absolute poverty and have little to no access to food and water. According to UNHCR, Yemen is regularly ranked among the world's worst in malnutrition rates and lacks safety to clean water. For example, Yemen's HDI in 2023 was 186. Their annual corruption index was 176, and their poverty rate was 82.7. To put that into perspective, Yemen and Oman have the second largest HDI disparity in the world. As a result, Yemen's poor HDI ranking can be linked to its failure to meet several development goals. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, adopted in 2015, are a set of 17 interconnected global objectives designed to achieve a more sustainable future by 2030. These goals represent an urgent call for action by all countries, developed and developing, in a global partnership to end poverty, improve health and education, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, tackle climate change, and preserve our oceans and forests while ensuring that no one is left behind. However, Yemen has failed to address many of these challenges due to its ongoing conflict. Yemen's struggle with poverty highlights its failure to meet SDG 1, entailing the goal of no poverty. Being one of the most severe humanitarian crises in the Middle East, poverty has been exacerbated by the ongoing conflict, disrupting economic activities, limiting access to employment activities, and has depreciated its currency, ultimately fostering economic instability. By 2014, an estimated 12.9 million people in Yemen lived in poverty, nearly half of the population, with 4.9 million of those living in extreme poverty, about 19% of the population. Facing absolute poverty, Yemen's lack of economic activities and access to food and supplies has left nearly half of its population in Yemen's government-controlled areas experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity between July and September of 2024. As a result, this humanitarian crisis has left Yemen failing to meet SDG 2, which entails zero hunger. As demonstrated by the chart, acute food insecurity projection update between October of 2023 to February 2024, the analyzed states listed in orange are considered crisis zones, meaning most Yemenis are facing some degree of starvation, while states listed in red are considered emergency zones, where starvation has led to around 17 million people food insecure, leaving 4.7 million people at crisis levels. Additionally, the humanitarian crisis in Yemen has had a severe impact on public health and well-being, severely compromising Yemen's capacity to meet SDG 3. The situation is in dire need of aid, as Yemen imports most of its food, due to its poor geography and climate, making it extremely vulnerable to external pressure, as Saudi Arabia has put sanctions on the ports due to the civil war. As a result, the port restrictions have drastically limited food accessibility, significantly increased food prices, and disrupted existing supply chains in a place that already faces absolute poverty, drastically harming Yemen's population. For example, these impacts have exacerbated widespread malnutrition, specifically in children, increased susceptibility to disease, and worsening pre-existing health issues. In addition to this issue, Yemen's care system has collapsed with a staggering 46% of its facilities as non-functioning or partially functioning due to shortages in staff, funds, electricity, medicine, supplies, and equipment. As a result, making it extremely difficult for Yemenis to get access to healthcare and seek treatment. Yemen's water crisis poses a huge obstacle to meeting SDG 6, which deals with clean water and sanitation. Multiple interconnected factors such as poor geography and an arid climate create undesirable conditions and limit water availability. According to UNICEF, currently more than 16 million people, including 8.47 million children, are in need of urgent water, sanitation, and hygiene assistance, and access to clean and safe drinking water. This situation is severely exacerbated by poor decisions in agriculture, where 90 to 95% of the water is allocated, leaving not enough water supply for the entire country. For example, according to the New York Times, thanks to bad planning and population growth, Yemen could be the first country to run out of water in 10 to 15 years. Failures to meet SDG 1, 2, 3, and 6 are heightened by security threats posed by the civil war. For example, Yemen's ongoing conflict has destroyed much infrastructure, its economy, and social fabrics. For example, schools, hospitals, roads, and other critical infrastructure has been decimated by the conflict, and the Yemeni economy has collapsed, leaving essential commodities like food out of reach for most families. As a result, millions of Yemenis remain displaced from their homes and at risk from hunger and disease. This political instability has made it impossible for any form of development to occur, as the country lacks both the institutional capacity and secure environment necessary for sustainable progress, making it impossible to meet SDG 16. Without the presence of peace, functioning institutions focused on the betterment of the people cannot exist, as their attention is focused on resolving the conflict. Yemen's attempts to save itself. Yemen has undertaken several significant initiatives to address the political and security challenges to improve their situation. One approach to peace building Yemen has taken is through the National Dialogue Conference in 2014, which represented a crucial milestone towards national reconstruction and transforming its political landscape. This 10-month conference aimed to regulate political life away from a culture of violence, an ambitious goal with specific emphasis controlling the proliferation of weapons. However, the effectiveness of these reforms have been significantly delayed by various armed groups, most notably the Houthis, whose resistance has undermined its implementation. Yemen has actively sought for international aid, particularly the United Nations, to help broker peace agreements and facilitate negotiation between warring parties. Additionally, Yemen has implemented a domestic approach through its election under the Gulf Cooperation Council initiative, which aims to establish legitimate government institutions through parliamentary and presidential elections. As a result, Yemen, with the help of the international community created by UN Security Council Resolution 2216, to provide the framework for a political solution by endorsing the Gulf Cooperation Council initiative and incorporating outcomes from the national dialogue process.
The global response to Yemen's crisis has been significant. Through the United Nations agencies, the international community has provided a significant humanitarian response to address Yemen's humanitarian crisis, implementing a multifaceted approach to ensure success. One key player, UNICEF, is tackling significant issues by helping treat severe acute malnutrition in children by providing essential therapeutic food and medication, while rehabilitating damaged schools and establishing safe learning spaces. UNICEF's commitment to the cause showcases the organization's commitment to intermediate psychological needs and long-term development goals, hoping for these people to be able to reach higher levels on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The scale and scope of UN's intervention is best demonstrated by the World Food Programme's extensive food distribution network in both urban and rural areas. For example, each month, the UN's food program distributes 100,000 metric tons of food commodities at more than 5,000 distribution points, reaching more than 8 million Yemenis. Additionally, other UN agencies such as the World Health Organization and the UN Children's Fund have been able to address critical health and social challenges. For example, they have reached more than 300,000 people with the cholera vaccines. This joint collaboration showcases how cooperation can quickly and effectively address critical public health crises among conflict-affected regions. Furthermore, the UN Population Fund has provided necessary sexual and reproductive health services to 250,000 girls and women, addressing the heightened vulnerability of young girls and women in conflict situations where basic health care is compromised. The results of UNICEF have been very widespread, reaching 2 million people to have the access to safe drinking water, and additionally, one NGO that is working towards Yemen's recovery towards development is Save the Children. Working in Yemen since 1963, today, Save the Children is one of the largest aid organizations operating in Yemen. This NGO provides humanitarian services such as assisting children, health programs, education, protection programs, emergency programs, promotion policy reforms, and advocating for localization. Oman, an 18-year-old boy, was paralyzed after he and his friend were hit by an artillery shell. He was taken to the hospital later that day, and more importantly, Save the Children have claimed to support over 200 health facilities across the world in Yemen to deliver vital nutrition services for babies, children, and mothers, just like Oman. Its success stories follow that in 2023 alone, Save the Children programs and partners reached 105.9 million children worldwide in 115 countries, helping them grow up healthy, learning, and safe.
Approaches to resolving Yemen's complex crisis requires addressing both immediate concerns as well as long-term sustainability. The most pressing issue includes the demilitarization of Yemeni society and politics, supported by possible economic reforms such as currency unification. However, this approach requires careful implementation, as noted in a recent report by the UN panel of experts on Yemen. Printing their own currency could allow for the Houthis to generate and utilize further funding for military purposes, avoiding existing sanctions. To counteract this issue, regional diplomatic support is absolutely necessary to help facilitate peaceful negotiations, especially from neighboring states such as Oman and Saudi Arabia. This is especially crucial for potential peace opportunities, as Yemen can benefit from the recent ceasefire in Gaza, another pressing humanitarian crisis and a point of interest for both Oman and Saudi Arabia. For example, the cessation of Houthi attacks linked to the Gaza conflict could help to lift obstacles to implementing previously negotiated peace solutions, as well as increased humanitarian aid and resuming trade. This interconnected approach recognizes that the complex crisis in Yemen could be resolved on multiple political and economic fronts, but depends on local, regional, and state actors to achieve some form of success. Yemen's crisis is a story of survival against all odds, a nation caught in the grip of war, hunger, and instability, but it is not beyond saving. While the challenges remain overwhelming, global efforts, humanitarian aid, and diplomatic solutions offer a glimpse of hope. The world cannot afford to turn away now. As Yemen stands at a crossroads, the question is no longer just about survival. It's about the possibility of rebuilding, of peace, and a future where Yemen is no longer trapped in a cycle of suffering. The time to act is now.